Hey, everybody. Welcome to Boone County Cryptids. In the shadows of America's forgotten places, something stirs. Join hosts Wyatt and Richard on Boone County Cryptids as they track down the country's most chilling cryptid encounters, one eerie story at a time. From midnight howls to figures lurking just beyond the tree line, every episode pulls you deeper into the unknown. Hey, guys, and welcome to Boone County Cryptids again. My name's Wyatt Estes, and my co-host Richard Brucia. He's with us sometimes, and anyway, what we do is we collect stories from guests and have them email to us, and if they want to come on the show, well, then we'll have them on the show and let them tell their stories online. No story's too big or too small. Every encounter is a piece of the puzzle. So whether you think your encounter is important or not, it is, because it takes all the pieces to put a puzzle together. All right, guys. Tonight we have best-selling author D.A. Roberts. He's a retired law enforcement. He is a former armed service member, and as Forrest Gump says, he's one of my best good friends. How you doing, D.A.?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for the intro.
You're welcome. Sorry, I'm new to this, so it's going to take me a little while to get it, knock the rust off. But
after that introduction, I feel like I need to go. I'm doing all right. After that introduction, though, I feel like I need to go shrimp. I love shrimp. There's shrimp kebab, shrimp scampi.
Yeah. All right, Forrest, you lean up against me, and I'll lean right back up against you. That way we ain't got to sleep with our heads in the mud.
If I went somewheres, I was running.
Love it. Oh, so DA, I'm gonna throw a couple things out there before we really get started. Daniel Hamilton from the Cryptid podcast, he has created a GoFundMe account for Joshua Smith and his wife. His wife is suffering from mold toxicity, I believe is what it is. And they've had to move like 12 times in the past year or two. And every time they leave, they pretty much have to leave everything behind because of risk of being exposed to the mold again, because black mold gets on everything. Even if you can't see it, there's spores that can attach to things. And, Josh is a real good person. He'd give you the shirt off his back. But Daniel has created a GoFundMe. If you guys would go to the Cryptid podcast on his YouTube page or his TikTok page, it's all the Cryptid podcast, or his Facebook page. And even if you can't give any money, at least, send prayers to them, because they need everything they can get right now. So that's mainly the one thing I wanted to talk about. But D.A., you've had a couple of big things happen the past couple of days. You want to talk about them?
Well, I've just released a new book. It's the fourth in the Lakeview Man series. It's called Lakeview Man Dead of Winter. It's doing pretty well so far. I'm hoping it goes to bestseller status, but it's close. It's in the top 35 in 3 categories. I'm just hoping it gets to number 1 in at least one of them. Going to keep my fingers crossed and do some more promotions, and hopefully that'll help push it all the way up. Also released my entire book collection on audio, which took some time in doing, but it's now available. Up until just a few days ago, there was only like 3 or 4 of my books available in audio. But now pretty much the entire library is out there. 36 books now for people to listen to stories on cryptids and zombies and monsters and things that go bump in the night. So it's been a pretty productive couple of days getting everything out. And I'm almost done with another book. The next one in the Dark Frontier series. It's called Dark Frontier's Mountain Devil of the Absarokas, and it's set in the mountains of Wyoming. And I'm about 50,000 words into that project, so I'm hoping to have it done in the next week or two.
Awesome. I've started reading your new book, and, well, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag or anything, but when DA was talking on the Nightmare Hunters podcast last night that he figured it would surprise a lot of people, well, it surprised me. I was not expecting what happened. but it's a great book so far, and I'm probably going to finish it either tonight or tomorrow. You had something else happen last night, didn't you?
I have gotten a few text messages and emails like, "Why'd you do that?" But that's to be expected anytime a character dies. What was that? What was the other question?
You had something else happen last night too, didn't you? You started something new on YouTube. It's not necessarily new, but you got something.
Well,
you changed some stuff, right?
yeah, we relaunched the DAX Machina podcast. We've been talking about doing it for the past couple of months because the podcast actually just started out as a way for me to promote my books and maybe interview a few other authors and things like that. And it's really grown beyond that. It's now that Doc and Robbie and Steve are involved, and even you from time to time. It's really more about what we do than just about my books. We still talk about the books. We talk about Robbie's books. We've even had other authors on recently. But the focus is more about the field investigations and looking for evidence and things like that. So we renamed and rebranded the podcast. It's now called the Nightmare Hunters podcast because we're all nightmare hunters. Every one of us that go out, even you, Wyatt, every one of us that go out in the field or are digging into this mystery of cryptids, we're all nightmare hunters at some point in our careers. So this is more of a way to for the show to be about everybody and not specifically about me and my books.
Well, I've really enjoyed it so far, and that was a good show last night. I think it'll help you guys grow and stuff, and reach maybe a bigger audience now too.
I hope so.
I just want to thank you for promoting me on your channel and stuff like that. It really means a lot to me.
Hey, brother, I'm happy to. I mean,
so DA,
I'm a firm believer that and when the tide rises, all ships should rise. I mean, I'm not in this just to promote myself. I'm all about helping other authors, helping other podcasters, because if we don't help each other, nobody's gonna.
That's right. And even with you and Robbie, I love that collaboration you guys have together, that you can kind of lean on each other and bounce ideas off each other. And, I know you both would give the shirt off your back to the person in need. And I really love that about you guys. So
Robbie's an awesome dude.
Robbie's the man. I like Robbie a lot. So DA, you want to kind of give us an introduction on how you got introduced to cryptids?
Sure. I'm a farm kid from rural Missouri. I lived on a farm out north of a little town in Missouri called Lebanon. It's about 15,000 people now, but back in the early 70s, it was considerably smaller. Kind of a little one-horse town, and we lived on a farm. And I grew up here when I was a kid when I first saw the Patterson Gimlin footage, and then of course we had those old insert shows with Leonard Nimoy. And I bugged my mom so much, she got me those old Time Life books that were about like the Loch Ness Monster and stuff. And I just devoured those as a kid. And as a young kid, like 4 or 5 years old, I was already asking my neighbors and relatives and stuff if they'd seen Bigfoot, and of course everybody just thought I was a crazy kid. But some odd things happened when I was a kid, and they always kind of stuck with me. Like I said, we lived on a farm kind of out in the crack of nowhere. I remember one summer, my parents wouldn't, and I was still little, like 3 or 4. My parents wouldn't let me sleep in my bedroom. They made me sleep on a pallet next to their bed. And I would ask them why. And they said because there was a screech owl that every night would land and stay outside my window, and they didn't want me to be scared. And I don't remember the screech owl, but I do remember this. There was no trees outside my bedroom window. So there's no way there was a screech owl out there. They were worried about something else. And I do remember as a kid, Dad would work a lot of overnights in town and then come back and work the farm during the day. And I remember a lot of times when I was little, my mother worried about what she referred to as prowlers. And my older brother Buddy would sleep with a loaded shotgun next to his bed so he could go out, because sometimes those prowlers were like messing around at my sister's windows. And Buddy would run out there with the shotgun. Of course, he'd be gone by the time he got out there. And that was just another like weird bit. but we would hear this knocking sound from the woods behind the house. We had a big pasture behind the house. We had a big pasture for the horses and cows, and we raised hogs. And we had a big garden and a grove of pear and apple trees. But behind all of that, way back, probably 150 yards from the house, was a thick stand of trees. And at night, I would hear a knocking sound coming from there. And we've talked about it on my show, and I'll see if I can duplicate it here for you.
We can't hear you, DA.
How about now? You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
For some
Yeah,
reason,
I
it
can hear you.
muted
Can
me.
you hear me?
Yeah, for some reason it muted my mic.
Sorry
I don't know. I didn't touch it, but it did. But I've grown up in the '70s with no cable TV or anything like that. We got like 2 channels on a good day. I spent 90% of my time outdoors, playing in the dirt and being a country kid. And I would hear these noises like birds and stuff, and I would mimic those noises, and I got pretty good at it. I could mimic most bird sounds that I heard, but I kept hearing this one knocking sound, and I kept trying to mimic it. But at first I thought it sounded like a baseball bat, like somebody was hitting baseball bats together, making a real sharp crack. But the more I listened to it, the more it sounded organic. It didn't really sound like wood on wood. It sounded like something just making the noise. So I finally learned how to mimic a really close proximity. And hopefully I won't. Let me know if the sound comes through on the microphone.
Okay. Yeah,
I can do that. I can do that very loud. Ask Robbie, Doc, or any of the guys that have been out in the woods. I can make it echo across the lake. So the idea, the idea I got as I got older was that what people referred to as wood knocks from Bigfoot, I think, is actually a lot of it. And I'm not saying all of it, but I'm saying a lot of it is probably them using their tongue, like a type of echolocation, letting each other know where they're at, and if they're subterranean a great deal, like we theorize that they might be, it's also a good way to locate open spaces underground, because some of those caves are pretty deep. Like Mammoth Cave goes miles and miles down. So if these things are using caves, they would have to be able to figure out which passages were safe to use and things like that. And we know for a fact humans who are born blind have taught themselves to do a limited form of echolocation. In fact, there was even a video of a guy going around who was absolutely blind, who had taught himself to ride a bike by clicking his tongue, which to me, it just lends credence that these things truly are subterranean, at least for a good part of the time. But also explain why they're so hard to find, because we don't spend a whole lot of time in caves. It's rare to hear about a deep exploration of a cave system. For the most part, people stay out of them, and that would just be the perfect highway system for them to use for shelter and even travel.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, that's what me and Richard kind of theorize about where we go out on the lake. We think there's probably a family unit of them out there somewhere, and there's got to be a cave out there somewhere that they go in to take shelter or whatnot. But
if that's Table Rock Lake, there are lots of caves out there.
Right. Yeah, as soon as you get where we put in the boat at, if you just going through the kind of the marina there, if you look up to the left-hand side of the lake, you can see, like, they're not very big, but you can see kind of entrances on the cliff face. I don't know how far they go back in there, but it wouldn't be nothing for them to be deep caves back in there, I think. So,
well, out of Moon Valley where we've gone, there's like 120 foot cliff faces out there on both sides of the valley. And in both of those cliff faces, there are massive caves. And since some of them would require either rappelling down to or climbing gear to get up to, we have no idea how deep they are.
Right. Can you explain a little bit, DA, about how the maps overlay, like the cave systems and the missing 411 and stuff like that?
Well, the David Pilates and the Missing 411 started talking about national parks, disappearances in national parks. And certain national parks are more active than others. And for years, the Department of the Interior has been covering up the disappearances in parks. They won't publicly release the numbers. They won't give away a lot of details. Even with Freedom of Information Act requests, they're only giving up very limited amounts of information. So we know there's something going on in national parks that we're not being told. And David Pilates has documented so many cases of people that have gone missing under odd circumstances. Now, he's not saying ones that when somebody got lost for a day or two and wandered back into camp and just got off trail. No, he's very specific about the criteria he uses. They have to have disappeared under specific circumstances and either not found at all or found someplace that is not logical for them to have been found in. In many cases, some of the bodies have been found in areas that have already been searched numerous times. So we're just talking, he's only profiling the ones that are really bizarre, the ones that are hard to explain. And I do believe that there's cryptids involved in it. But if you take the Missing 411 map, he's got a big map that he put out on his Missing 411 Can-Am project. The map shows the locations of the clusters and the superclusters. And if you take that map and overlay that map with a map of the United States known cave systems, they line up perfectly.
Yeah, I've always thought that was real interesting. There has to be a correlation. And with the fact that you said that, we believe that they might echolocate, that would be the perfect way of communication if you're underneath the ground. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Well, the United States Geological Survey now believes that the Mammoth Cave System, which we formerly thought had hundreds of miles of cave systems beneath Tennessee and Kentucky, they believe now it actually connects to a much bigger cave system that extends from Maine to southern New Mexico.
That is crazy.
That would literally be thousands of miles of cave systems, of which we've only explored maybe 1%. Maybe.
Yeah, and if they go as far as they're saying, I mean, that's basically an underground travel route. It'd be like the interstate of the underground. So,
well, another thing, people that a lot of people that don't really pay attention to this type of field, you get people that are like, I don't think Bigfoot exists because I've never seen it. Well, how much time do you really spend in the deep woods? Even deer hunters that I've known, deer hunters are creatures of habit. They find a place they like to deer hunt. They put their stand up. They tend to go to that same spot over and over. I've done it. You've done it. Most hunters I know do it. They've got a deer camp or a place where they've got their stand set up, and that's the place they continue to go back to. Just because you haven't seen a wolf in that area doesn't mean there's not wolves in the area. Just because you haven't seen mountain lions in that area doesn't mean there's not mountain lions in that area. Just because you haven't seen a Bigfoot doesn't mean it's not out there. If you're up there in a stand, odds are they know you're there long before you know they're there. And they tend to try to avoid us. But when you look at all of that, well, like we were talking about the Missing 411 maps, another map you really should look at is if you can Google this map. I've got a copy of it. I just posted it on my Facebook. It's a map of the Mississippi and all the tributaries, all the creeks and rivers and everything that dumps into the Mississippi. And it covers pretty much all of the United States, from the Canadian border to the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachian Mountains to all the way down to New Orleans. Pretty much that entire area has a super highway system where these creatures could just be easily following lakes and rivers.
Yeah. So they can go above ground or they can go below ground. And I mean, more than likely, they'd never be seen. And then plus, if you think about it this way, all the highline right-of-ways that traverse the country,
yeah,
that's nothing but open ground for them to walk through too. So.
Well, when you look at the national park system, the national parks, when they were first set aside, they set aside about 88.5 million acres of national park land. You think about that being undeveloped land for habitat for animals, 88.5 million acres is a lot of ground. But when you start digging into that and add into that state parks and then you add in wildlife management areas and conservation areas and Bureau of Land Management areas and Native American reservations that aren't that developed. They just, they're set aside for the natives. When you put all of that land together, it goes from 88.5 million to over 1 billion acres of undeveloped land in North America.
That when you think about it, that's insane because I mean,
so maybe you don't believe in Bigfoot, but have you walked every acre of that 1 billion acres?
Yeah, that's like Robbie saying. People always say, "Well, sharks don't exist. I've never seen one in the ocean." It's like dipping a teaspoon into the ocean and saying, "Hey, there's no sharks."
Exactly.
So.
Well, just the state of Alaska alone. What's that?
I'm sorry. You go ahead, buddy. I'm sorry.
I was going to say just the state of Alaska alone. No other states, none of the lower 48, just Alaska. If you were able to walk around Alaska and fully investigate 1 square mile a day, and that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you're walking a square mile, that is a lot of ground to cover. But if you could feasibly explore 1 square mile a day, it would still take you over 125 years to see all of Alaska.
Man, I can't even imagine that. Alaska is just so vast.
That's just Alaska. You throw in northern parts of Canada and the wild spaces in the lower 48 of the U.S., that is just an astronomical amount of undeveloped land.
Yeah, I'd say the probability is pretty high of something being able to hide in that amount of land.
Easily.
But yeah, you were talking about hunting a minute ago and how a lot of us have had him, we go to the same deer stand and stuff like that. But if I remember right, you had something happen while you were hunting one time, didn't you?
I've had a few things happen while I was hunting. One of my earliest experiences, I was about 15. I was on my Uncle Buddy's land out by Eldridge, Missouri. And Uncle Buddy didn't live in town. He lived in the sticks. His closest neighbor was several miles away. When I say he lived in the middle of nowhere, he lived in the middle of nowhere. And he had 160 acres up against like 5,500 acres of conservation land. So there was really no other property that bordered his that didn't belong to the state. And he was very selective about who he let hunt on his land. And I would go out there and deer hunt and, fish and camp and everything. And but I had a deer stand on his land when I was about 15. And I got out there pretty early. I know you're probably like me. You like to get out there a little early and settle in. So it was still good and dark. It was probably close to 3 a.m. when I went out there and got in that stand. And just wanted to settle down and let the forest go back to normal and, things to get used to my presence. And by the time sunrise, I'd be ready to hunt. So I get up in the deer stand, and I was in a pretty good sized tree, and I think it was a big walnut tree. It might have been a big oak, but I'm pretty sure it was a big hardwood, and it was wider around than I could reach. It was a big tree. Right. And I was facing a field where we had we during the year we'd had had food plots put out and stuff like that, but I was facing this field, and I was just back in the trees, just a few yards, just far enough back where it'd be hard enough to see me. And had a great view of the field. It was a cold night, clear skies. Stars are twinkling. I don't remember there being much of a moon, but it was pretty dark. But my eyes had adjusted, and lots of leaf litter on the ground. And I hear footsteps coming up behind me on my deer stand. And when I say this area of land that I'm hunting was remote, like I said, he's got no neighbors. There's nobody out there hunting on his land because he's got it posted, and there's the few neighbors he does have could hunt on their own land. I mean, they've got land out there, so it's not like we would expect a poacher to be out there. But I hear something walking up behind me, and I had a little Motorola radio with me, but I figured it was my Uncle Buddy coming to check on me. But I got to thinking, man, those footsteps sound awful heavy, and so I just listened, and I hear it approach and stop, just not far behind my tree. And so I'm thinking maybe this ain't Uncle Buddy. So and the odds of somebody that didn't know I was out there walking up on that deer stand, because I was camoed. The deer stand was camoed. I was in a tree that was surrounded by other trees. Without somebody with a flashlight or knowing exactly where I was, they weren't going to find me in the dark. But this walked literally right up the back of the tree that I was in. And I'm thinking, that didn't sound like Uncle Buddy. It sounded too heavy. So I go, hey, who's back there? And I hear this deep intake of breath, like that, and then it goes, and I hear it turn and start walking away, and that heavy step again. So I'm like scrambling ass to get out of this tree, and I was pretty far up. I was like 12, 13 feet up at a climbing stand, and by the time I get down and get my headlamp on, all I can see is the impressions in the leaves, and there's nothing there. And there was kind of a like a faint skunky smell in the air that I hadn't noticed when I was up in the tree, and I'm like, who the hell is out here? So, at that point, I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So I beat feet back to the house, and I told my uncle about it, and he goes, yeah, that wasn't a person. He said, I guarantee you that's one of the creatures I've been telling you lives down these river bottoms. Because there's parts of his land that had an old dry creek bed on it that went down to the Niagara River. He said, whatever you do, don't hunt down there. You stay the hell out of there. That's an area we don't hunt. I'm like, okay. Well, the next year after that event in the tree stand, same deer stand, but facing the same clearing where we put out food plots, but a little farther away. Wasn't in the same spot. So about a year later, I think I was about 16 at the time. I'm up in the stand and it's daylight, and I've been dying. I've got buck fever, and you know what that's like. I'm like, oh, I just can't wait. Yeah, and I'd already passed on a couple of small does, and I wanted a good sized buck. And lo and behold, finally, out one walks. It steps out into the clearing and starts looking around, and it had a beautiful rack. It was probably a 12-pointer. I mean, beautiful. And I was hunting with a British 303 with a soft nose lead, and that'll knock something down and put it there, and make sure it stays there.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, oh, I am so jazzed. I want to take this shot. So I'm making myself take a deep breath and slow down. I bring the rifle up slowly, and I sight in. And I'm controlling my breathing, and I'm lining up that shot, and I get it right in a sweet spot, and boom! That soft nose round does its job. That buck goes straight down. And so I start shimmying my ass out of this tree and to head over there. And by the time I get to the bottom, it has gotten up, is like wobbling off. Well, I knew I got it good. So I go hauling over there as quick as I can. It's about 60 yards, 70 yards away. And it's already off in the brush. So I go right to where it dropped, and there's plenty of blood on the ground, and then lung tissue, or what we call lung butter. Right. And there's lung butter on the ground and blood with bubbles in it. And I'm like, yeah, he ain't going far. So I start tracking this thing, and lo and behold, it jumps off into that dry creek bed. And I tracked it to where it dropped. And I looked down off the edge, just about 20 feet down, and I see the deer laying in the leaves at the bottom. And it's not breathing, it's just laying there. It's dead. This deer has hit that spot and bled out. But it's like 20 feet up. I figured if I jump down, I'm breaking my legs. So I kind of get a fix on the position where I know it's at, and I start heading up the ravine looking for a lower place to get down. And I'm going 15 minutes maybe trying to find a place where I can shimmy down. And I finally found a spot that was 5-6 feet where I could shimmy down, then reach up and grab my rifle. But by the time I get back to that spot, I can see the leaves and I can see a large quantity of blood, but there are no deer. There's no deer, and there's no tracks. And this is like rocky, it's a old creek bed, so it's all rocks. So at first I thought maybe it got up and staggered off, but looking at the quantity of blood, I'm like, if it got up, it didn't stagger far. So I start kind of spiraling out slowly, getting farther and farther from the drop site, and I'm still not finding anything. I don't find a drop of blood. I don't find anything on anything that looks like a track, especially deer tracks. I don't find anything. So I grabbed my little radio and I called Uncle Buddy. I'm like, hey, Uncle Buddy, I think somebody's out here on your land. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I shot a buck. It had to have been a 12-pointer. It was beautiful, and now it's gone. He goes, well, where are you? I said, well, I'm down in the creek bottom. He goes, what are you doing down there? I said, well, that's where I tracked it to. It dropped in the creek bottom. I saw it. I found a spot to get down. Now I'm down in the creek bottom, but my deer's gone. And he said, listen to me and listen very carefully. There's no poacher out there. No person stole your deer. If you don't get out of there, you're going to join it. Get out of there now. So I go back up, shimmy out of the creek bottom, go back up to the house. He's like, that deer is gone. Don't worry about it. Just tomorrow morning, go out and try to get your tag. He said, but don't go in those river bottoms looking for that deer, because you aren't going to find anything but heartbreak.
Yeah. Yeah, like he said, I mean, if you'd have tried to push it much further, you may have been missing just like your deer.
Well, I'd already noticed that where I was at, it was just dead quiet. And, I'd heard plenty of sounds up until then, but it was just, if that was an eerie feeling, and he's passed away now and the land's been sold to someone else, but I would love to get down there and talk to the new owner and see if they're having similar problems.
Right. Yeah. I bet. I mean, I would almost guarantee they probably, unless that particular Bigfoot passed away and there was no other ones on there, which I doubt that's the case. If they've had young through the years, I'm sure there's probably still something on it. Now, did he think that?
What's that?
Did he think that they were Bigfoot, or was there dogman there too?
No, he only talked about Bigfoot.
Yeah.
He did tell me about when I started writing the Apex Predator books. I mentioned the Ulonga Doglala. Well, he's the one I heard about the Cherokee legend from. The spirit with knife teeth, basically like a werewolf, but it doesn't change forms. That's where I first heard about that. But what he warned me about on that land were Bigfoot. And there were certain times of the year that he just wouldn't let you camp. He'd be like, if you want to spend the night out here, stay up here at the house, we'll shoot some pool, but this is not a good night to stay in that river bottom. He knew the times of year when it was dangerous for you to be camping out there, and he wouldn't let you.
All right. I don't think I've ever had a chance to ask you, but did he ever have any sort of aggressive encounter around his house, his cabin around there? Or?
Yeah, he would have deer meat go missing out of his deep freeze all the time. He had one try to get in because he had a walkout basement where his pool table was, and had one standing in the sliding glass door looking in the house while he was shooting pool. He looked up and saw it, and when it realized he saw it, he grabbed a rifle, and it turned, and just off his back porch, the ground went out about 30 feet, and then it's just angled down. His house is built on top of a bluff looking over the Niagara River Valley, and he ran out the door, and it had gone straight down that bluff, and I'm talking probably a 60-degree angle, maybe 45, but no less than 45. But it was a pretty steep angle going down the side of that bluff, and it was going straight down it, grabbing saplings and tree branches that were sticking out of the ground, and just went straight down all the way down to the river. And I asked him if he shot at it. He said no. He said, but I kind of get the feeling that if I ever do, that'll probably be the end of me.
Right. Yeah. That would be crazy, especially looking in your sliding glass window. I've got 4 big bay windows in my living room. Of course, I'm here in town, but so I've got that advantage. But if I looked out and seen something staring at me through those big bay windows, I'd probably have a brown pants moment.
Don't think just because you're in town that you're safe. Remember that story we talked about last night on the show? That was in town. The guy saw that from a Motel 6.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I know they're here in my town because my dad found that track
right there in town at a dumpster. Yeah, so if your dog's barking at something getting in your trash at night, it might not be raccoons. Yeah, kind of give me goosebumps just thinking about it. So let's kind of stick with the Bigfoot thing, DA. Okay.
Let's kind of go over some of what we thought were Bigfoot encounters. You want to talk about when you and Robbie and Doc and Noah all went out to Moon Valley and Blunk Road? You want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, this last January, the last week of January, Robbie and Doc were in town. And it's rare that we all get to hang out together because Doc lives in Colorado and Robbie lives in South Carolina. But when they were here, me and Doc and Robbie and my youngest son, Noah, we all went to a bunch of places going out to outings. And one of the places we went is a place here in Missouri on the Niagara River called Moon Valley. And Moon Valley's always had kind of a weird reputation. Back in 2020, there were 2 guys arrested that were living in Moon Valley that were abducting and killing people and selling the meat. They went to they went to prison for cannibalism. And I don't think the story really ended with them, but it kind of disappeared with them, if you get my meaning. So it makes me wonder if that kind of thing still goes on out there. There was a cult out there in the valley. There's all kinds of weird stuff in Moon Valley. And most of that is now private property. It used to be a campground down there when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time down there in my teenage years. But it's all private property, and now it's posted no trespassing. But back in the day, you could walk all over that valley. But we went down there, and there's still a public access there where we're not going to get run off because it's not private property. So we went down to the public access part, and there's a low water concrete bridge that the Niangua actually, when the river's up, it flows over the bridge, but for the most part, it flows under the bridge. But it's just a concrete slab bridge, and we parked on that, and we're sitting out there, listening. We waited till it was good and dark, so we talked about seeing if we could call something in, because we knew that there'd been sightings in the valley, Bigfoot and dogman, to be honest. But so first thing we tried was I tried the tongue pop, and I did that a few times and waited, and we didn't hear anything. And then we had Robbie do then Robbie did a whoop, a couple of Bigfoot type whoops, and nothing happened with that. Then Doc did a hoot owl call. He specifically picked the call of an owl that's not local. He used an owl call from somewhere on the West Coast. I can't remember which species of owl he used, but it was a West Coast native owl. It wasn't a Missouri owl. So he did this call, nothing. Robbie goes, I got an idea. I said, what's that? He goes, what if I try a wolf howl? I said, well, go for it. What's worse could happen? So he did a wolf howl that really wasn't like it sounded more like you would expect like a werewolf, not a like an actual wolf howl. And he lets out with this bark and howl, and goes a couple of times. And the second he stopped, from farther down the valley, we got that owl call back, the West Coast owl call. A perfect match came right back to us, and we looked at each other like, holy crap. He's like, should I do it again? I'm like, well, let's wait and see what's going on. And by this point, it's completely pitch black, and we're standing. There's a moon out, so we're standing in the middle of this concrete bridge, and we can hear things coming up through the trees. So Doc gets his thermal out. We've got our flashlights turned off. Doc gets his thermal out, and he goes, hey, I'm seeing heat signatures in the woods. I'm like, okay, where? And he points to the I believe it's the south side of the river. He points and says, there's something about 50 yards over there behind trees watching us. So Robbie and I headed over there. Probably not the brightest thing we've ever done, but we headed over there. Noah was staying on the bridge with Doc. Noah had a 30-30 rifle, was covering Doc. Doc was filming with the thermal, and Robbie and I both had a 1911 on, but that's all we had was a pistol. Right. So we're heading straight at where Doc said that he's seeing the thermals. And it's so dark underneath the canopy, I don't really see anything. He's like, all right, you're facing straight at it. He said, I'm going to turn the thermal off. Why don't you guys turn on your headlamps and see what you see? So we wait till him to give him a second to turn it off. I reached up and hit my light on my hat, flipped it on. And immediately we saw 2 like wide-shouldered things with like a conical head, dark fur, duck back behind the trees. As soon as that light came on, they were right behind those trees. And I'm like, yep, I got him. He goes, yeah, there should be 2 of them. I said, yeah, we saw both of them. One of them was a little smaller than the other. So I turned my light back off, and Doc turns the thermal back on. He goes, yep, they're looking at you again. So Robbie and I started getting closer. And we got probably within 10 yards where they were at, and we'd had at that point we hadn't drawn our weapons, and Doc goes, fall back. I'm like, why? He goes, because there's a third one coming in behind you. Dang. So I draw, Robbie draws, And I put my hand on Robbie's shoulder and turned to the right, which is where Doc was saying they were coming from. The third one had gone up through a stand of trees and was trying to cut us off from getting back to the vehicle. So I've got my weapon trained on that. Robbie's got his trained on the other two, and we're backing up, heading for the truck. And Doc goes, "It's still coming." So at this point, I'm thinking I'm either going to have to start cacking off rounds, or we're going to start moving a little faster. So once we hit the edge of the concrete bridge, we were probably still 20 yards away from the vehicle. Once we hit the edge, we kind of dropped the pretenses and turned and started booking, because Noah had brought the rifle up at that point to cover us. But we get back to the vehicle, and now we're hearing them. I mean, they're smashing through the trees. We heard a couple that were outside of the range of our cameras, crossing the river, trying to block us off. Doc's like, "I think we just called in a group. We need to get the hell out of here, because they're not liking the fact that we made a wolf call down here." And that's kind of what we thought, that they were it was a territorial reaction, because they sound like a dogman. So we jump in the truck, and it's about 5 miles from that bridge to Bennett Springs State Park. You've got to drive gravel road all the way up out of the valley, then down the highway a little ways, and then you drive into Bennett Springs. So we took off, went out, actually left the valley, went down the road, went down to Bennett Springs, and parked. And while we were sitting there kind of discussing what we'd just seen, we heard them coming. They had followed us down to Bennett Springs. Doc's like, "Screw this." So he fires it up and drives back, goes back to Moon Valley. And by the time we got back down to Moon Valley and parked on the bridge again, we could hear them smashing through the trees following us. And Doc's like, no, we need to get the hell out of here. These things are aggressive, and they're coming after us. So we piled in and took off, and we didn't go back that night. But yeah, that was pretty hairy. We inadvertently called them right in on us. And you've heard that dogman howl that was recorded in South Carolina. We played on the show a few times.
Right.
Next time we go back down there, we're going to play that. But we're going to go with a few more folks and a considerable amount more of pew-pews.
Right. Yeah.
But the goal is to get something out to draw something out that we can film it.
Yeah, that's people talk about them being the gentle forest giants, but most of the experiences you've had, and a lot of other people that I know have had, they don't really want you there. They usually are trying to get you out of there or frighten you somehow. And your experience there could have really turned violent if, you guys hadn't been on your toes. So.
Well, that night we were in Combs Ferry when Richard was on the boat and you were there on the ground, and we had my couple of my lieutenants from Greene County, Estrella and Jenkins, were out there. We had Steve out there, and Noah, you, Robbie, and me. Well, that night we had crap thrown at us, and we were hearing. Noah kept hearing what sounded like a foreign language on the shotgun mic. And by the time we made it back to the boat ramp and started pulling out, they were starting to come in on us. They were getting aggressive there.
You want to kind of talk about that a little bit, DA?
Well, yeah, Combs Ferry is an abandoned campground here in Missouri on Table Rock Lake that's been abandoned for, if I had to guess, probably 35, 40 years. It has been abandoned for a long time. But we've noticed a weird trend on the lakes here in Missouri of them, without explanation, shutting down otherwise active campgrounds. In Combs Ferry, Joe Bald, Big Bay, and most recently Drury-Mincy. That one was shut down just this month, without explanation, right in the height of camping season here in the Ozarks. Shut down an entire campground.
4th of July, wasn't it?
Yeah, the day before 4th of July, they shut it down. It's almost like they didn't want anybody down there making loud noises.
Right.
And we know that there have been plenty of adverse reactions to people making a lot of loud noise out in the woods. So I've been planning for over a year, wanting to get into Combs Ferry, because I'd first heard about the place from a buddy of mine that's a deputy in that county, and he's like, "I don't know what the hell happened in there." He said, "But I've never seen them bulldoze off a peninsula before." He said they bulldozed the lake off and even put a steel gate over the road to keep people out of there. He said, "I don't know why." So I don't get it. He said, "I've never heard anything of why they shut it down, but they actually went to the point of bulldozing off so you can't get in there with a vehicle. He says, that's pretty weird. And of course, I'd been wanting to go in there for a while. And that's when you and I started talking about it. And you're like, hey, if I can get us in there by boat. And I'm like, hell yeah. So a year ago this month, last July, hotter than balls. It had also been raining like crazy because the lake was way up. We took 7 of us. We took 7 of us in, but it was on Richard's bass boat. So we had to only go in small groups. We couldn't put everybody in at the same time. So me, Noah, and Robbie went in first. And he put us in, what is that, the east side of the peninsula? Put us in on the east side of the peninsula. And Noah and Robbie and I waited there. And we discovered pretty fast, going in with 3, well, technically 4 since Richard was driving, that putting in with 3 people in the boat, passengers, was about too much. I mean, it about swamped the boat. It was setting low in the water. It was barely moving. So three of us large fellas was a bit much. So Richard goes back to get the next group, which was you and Steve, and then I think you brought the lieutenants in last. I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it was Estrella and Jenkins, yeah.
So takes us better part of 45 minutes to get everybody boots on the ground in Combs Ferry. And as soon as Richard dropped me and Noah and Robbie off, the first thing we noticed was there was a lot of movement. It seemed like tentative movement, like what the hell are you doing here kind of movement. They weren't aggressive, they were just like curious. And we would hear small rocks and stuff, or hear small rocks getting thrown, and we'd hear branches breaking. And Noah got out the boom mic, and he said, I can hear stuff moving and breathing, but it's not getting close to us. So we kind of sat there nervously with the lights out, with our hands on our guns, until you and Steve showed up. When the 2 of you got there, once you were on the ground and Richard was going back for the last group, the activity kind of backed off, which I'm like, okay, there's more people here, so they're being a little more cautious. So by the time that Estrella and Jenkins got there, you could almost hear nothing. I mean, you just almost sounded like just normal wood sounds. The movement had backed even farther off. So we start moving in, and again, this was my first foray into Combs Ferry. I'd been wanting to get in for a long time. I've been into Joe Bald, I've been into Big Bay, I've been into other abandoned campgrounds. But Combs Ferry, I was not prepared for what we found. Joe Bald looks like, and it's been shut down since the late 90s. Joe Bald's been shut down 25 years plus. Joe Bald looks like you could go in there with some grounds crews, clean it up, and go back to camping. Most of the campsites are still intact. They were all primitive campsites with no water or electricity, and they're all still there. It looks like you could clean it up and back your RV into most of them and just go back to camping. So Joe Bald is still in good shape. It's just overgrown. Combs Ferry, not like that. Combs Ferry looks like somebody used it for artillery practice. The entire campground is destroyed. And I don't just mean, somebody went in with a sledgehammer and broke them up. I mean destroyed. It looks post-apocalyptic in there. Trees down, boulders bigger than I could reach around in the middle of the old trails. You couldn't get a vehicle through there if you wanted to. I don't even think you could get through there on a bicycle. But Combs Ferry is just destroyed. And I'm looking at this place, and snapping some pictures and stuff. I'm like, what do you make of this? This is crazy. And even Robbie, who had been at Joe Baldwin before, is like, yeah, this is nothing like Joe Bald. This place is just absolutely flattened, which was, that in and of itself was weird. So we started our investigation, which my plan was, since we'd put in on the side of the peninsula, we were going to go all the way to the tip of the peninsula, all the way back down the far side of the peninsula, and then make our way back down to the same spot we put in on. Richard was going to basically sit out there like he was fishing and just be on standby in case we needed him. What we didn't know at the time was when we first put in that Steve had broken his leg. When he got out of the boat, I guess he landed just right and cracked one of the bones in his lower leg. At first, he didn't even notice it, but that didn't come into play for a few hours. We started down the end of the peninsula, and we found what Robbie's a tracker for his department. He found what we refer to as a track trap. It's an area of dried mud where the ground had dried and the mud had cracked, and we found several remnants of tracks that looked to be in the 18-inch category. Now the ground was really bad. There was no way we could cast anything there, but we did get quite a few good pictures. And then over near another mud puddle, we found some other tracks that were actually in the mud under the water. And they also looked to be 16 to 18-inch variety. You could see the toes, you could see the heels, but they were under about 3 inches of water, so it was very difficult, impossible to even to cast those. But as we're moving around, was it you or Robbie that found the picnic table top?
Honestly, I can't remember. I know one of us did, but I couldn't tell you which one.
I think it was either you or Robbie that first discovered it. On one of the camp trails that wound through the old campground, we found the entire top of one of those concrete picnic tables. Probably 8 inches thick concrete by about 6 feet at least wide by 10 to 12 feet long. Massive, probably 2,000 pounds of concrete, and it had been ripped off an old picnic table and thrown about 30 yards into the middle of one of those old trails. It was still intact. Even the iron, the rebar that they put in to give it strength to hold it to the concrete table was still sticking out of it. The whole thing had just been ripped and chucked, and the rest of the campsite had just been obliterated. It would have taken massive heavy equipment to move that. There's no way people did that. And you could not get it. You couldn't get heavy equipment into that campground. No way. There's no way you could get anything wheeled that's getting back there. You might get back there in a tank if you're lucky, but you're going to plow over a lot of stuff. But after we found that, we took a bunch of pictures of that, and we're all kind of freaking out about it. I'm like, this is one of these tabletops, and we actually had to look around to find where it came from. It was about 30, 40 feet away in the woods.
At least.
So we checked that out and took some shots of the broken campsite. And again, all the campsites in there just look like they've been hit by artillery. I mean, they're just absolutely destroyed. And there's no tool marks on any of them, like somebody had done it with a jackhammer or sledgehammers. There's none of that. No tool marks on any of it. These are just smashed like somebody would take and stomp a plastic toy. These are just absolutely smashed apart. So we start moving a little further, and at that point, I'd gotten ahead of the group. I was maybe 15, 20 feet ahead of the rest of the group, and I turned my headlamp off, and I was just trying to let my eyes adjust to the dark and was listening. And that's when Noah was saying, "Hey, I'm hearing something on the shotgun mic, or the boom mic. No, parabolic mic." He said, "I'm hearing something on the mic that sounds like language." He said, "It sounds like somebody's talking, but it doesn't sound like any language I've ever heard." He said, "It just sounds like gibberish." And I'm like, so I went over and took one of the headphones, and yeah, sure enough, you could hear it. At that time, we didn't have a way to record our parabolic, which we do now. But we're planning another expedition out there to try to make better recordings. But now even I heard it, and but I was a little ways ahead of everybody, just kind of letting my night vision settle in, and Wyatt and Robbie were at the very back, and I don't know which one of you spotted it first, but then Robbie called me back. He's like, "Hey, you need to get back here and look at this." So I went trucking back to the back of the group, and just slightly above head level in a tree about this diameter, wasn't a very big tree at all, was the entire front leg quarter of a deer that had been ripped off, not cut off, not like snapped off at the joint. It had been twisted and ripped off. You could still see pieces of muscle and sinew where it had been twisted and torn off, and a huge chunk of skin had come with it as the front leg had been pulled off, and it was just stuck in the tree, just slightly above head level, right on the trail. And so we took a bunch of pictures of that, and I'm like, holy crap, because you could still see the blood. There were no flies on it. The blood was still red. There was no maggots on it. This had not been there very long. So we're looking at that, and Robbie goes, "What do you think that is?" I'm like, I'm guessing some kind of territorial marker. I think this is a warning. And that kind of became the consensus. We all kind of thought that. So at that point, that's when Steve's like, "Hey, my leg's starting to really hurt me." And I said, "Well, you okay?" He goes, "Well, I'll let you know, but if it gets bad, but I'm starting to have problems with my leg." So we put Steve to the middle of the group and kind of moved up a little bit. And we hadn't gone more than about 10 yards when on the other side of the trail, directly across from the deer leg, we found a fish that had been torn apart and stuck in the tree in the crook of a sapling about that big around. It wasn't a very big tree, so we know it wasn't an animal that put it up there. Something just shoved that down in the crook of that sapling. Sapling wasn't big enough to support anything. I don't even think it would have held up a raccoon. It was just a little bitty sapling. And it also was put right at head level. And I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a territorial warning. We're being told this is, don't go past here. So, of course, we did. And as soon as we went past it, that's when the activity picked up. We started getting more rocks thrown at us. We were hearing more vocalizations. We were hearing grunts. We were hearing stuff paralleling us in the trees on both sides. We started seeing dark shadows moving between the trees. And Steve's like, "Hey, my leg's getting bad." So I got Estrella back, one of my old lieutenants. He's a combat veteran from the Navy. Called him back. I'm like, "Hey, call up the GPS map." So he brings up the map, and we're looking at it. We got to get Steve out of here. His legs hurt. I don't think we're going to make it all the way because we'd already been walking 2.5 hours at that point. So getting back to where we put in at was probably not an option. And I said, "What have we got?" And Estrella goes, "Looks like an old boat ramp up here." So he zoomed in on the map, and I'm like, "Yeah, that looks like part of an old concrete boat ramp back when this place was open." He said, "How far?" I said, "How far is it?" He goes, "Doesn't look like it's more than a couple hundred yards away if we keep going this direction." So I asked Steve, I said, "Do you think you can make it?" He goes, "I might have to lean on somebody, but yeah, I'll get there." So I grabbed the radio, called Richard. I'm like, "Hey, do you know where the old boat ramp is on this peninsula?" He says, "It's on the other side of the peninsula. It's going to take me a few minutes to get there." I said, "Well, it's going to take us a few minutes to get there. But get around there and don't come in until you know we're there. So stay out in deep water until you actually see us on the boat ramp." So he starts heading his way. We move our way down, and that's when we found the big piles of bulldozed boulders and rocks and tree parts that have been pushed up to keep people out of there. Clearly, they brought in heavy equipment to keep people out. So we get past that, help Steve over that. And we get over, as we start heading over the boat ramp, those things are still paralleling us in the trees. And they got a little bolder at this point. We're hearing more rocks being thrown. We're hearing more limbs break. We're hearing grunts. By that point, Noah had stopped using the parabolic because there was just so much going on. He was getting overwhelmed. And so we get over there to the water, and Richard comes in. And I said, "Steve's hurt. Let's go ahead and get Steve out of here." And I looked at one of my lieutenants. I'm like, "LT," I asked Jenkins, I said, "Would you ride out with him, keep an eye on him, make sure he's okay?" He's like, "Yeah, no problem." So him and Steve get on the boat, and they head out. And we're now farther away from where our initial point of entry was. So it's going to take him a lot longer to go back to drop everybody at the vehicles and then get back to pick us up. So he takes off, and it's a good 20, 25 minutes before the boat comes back. And at that point, after he left with the first two, it was me, my son Noah, Robbie, you, and Estrella still on the ground. And they'd come in a little closer. We were still hearing rocks getting tossed and stuff. Richard comes back in. The noise kind of faded out. Boat comes up. I send Wyatt and Estrella out. So they head out. Hear the boat fade, and as soon as the boat has faded, they're coming in even closer because there's only 3 of us on the ground now. So I looked around at Robbie and Noah, and I said, "Okay, this expedition was my harebrained idea, and we've already discovered we can't put 3 people on the boat. When Richard comes back, I want the 2 of you to go. I'll stay." And Robbie's like, "The hell you are?" He said, "If you stay, you won't be here when they get back." I said, "Well, this whole thing was my idea. I was the first set of boots on the ground. I'm going to be the last set out." And so we were kind of arguing back and forth about that. And Richard was coming in at that point. But these things had gotten so close that by the time Richard got back, we were actually standing in the water with our weapons drawn, looking at the trees around us. So Richard comes cruising right back up to the boat ramp. And Robbie says, "Do you think you can get all 3 of us in here? Because I think it's going to be dangerous to leave one person behind." And Richard goes, "Well, we're going to have to go real slow, but yeah, we'll get everybody aboard." So everybody loads up. We get back aboard the boat, and Richard backs her out into the channel, and the water just off of Combs Ferry. The deepest part's probably about 280 feet. That's a lot of water off the bottom of that boat. So we're definitely going slow and being careful. But by the time we're pulling out, there's like a light fog, like a light layer of fog over the water. And Richard had this really bright spotlight that plugged into the battery on his boat. And he lit up the shoreline and was shining the area. And there were green eye shine like 8-10 feet off the ground all over where we had just been standing. And I tried to get pictures of it, but you couldn't really see it through the fog. The light glaring off the fog, I wasn't able to get it, but you could clearly see it. There was probably maybe as many as a dozen sets of green eye shine just all over where we had just been. And I was like, well, would you look at that? Robbie's like, yeah, if you'd have stayed, you wouldn't have been here when we got back.
I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I don't if we'd have left one person, I don't think they'd have been there when the boat came back.
All you would have heard from the boat ramp was gunfire. Maybe a yell, but that's about all you would have heard.
Well, if it had been me by myself there, I had a significant quantity of freedom seeds. So, yeah, there would have been a lot of gunfire.
Right. You would have at least have been a spicy enchilada.
Damn right. I probably had close to 75 rounds on me.
Heck yeah. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it right.
Damn right.
They'd have
paid for that meal.
They would have. Do you have time to talk about one or two more things?
Sure, absolutely.
What do you think about dogman, DEA? Have you ever had an experience?
Yeah, I actually saw one. Broad daylight in LBL. It would have been July of 22 when I saw it. And
what kind of?
I firmly believe they're I think they've been around as long as Bigfoot has, because they look at the historical documents on these things. The phrase dogman didn't come around until the 90s. Hell, the phrase Bigfoot wasn't coined until the 1950s. Jerry Crew and the sightings in Northern California. So those creatures have existed long before the names we know of. If you look back through historical texts, you can find wild man attacks or hairy man attacks. Native American tribes have hundreds of names for these things. So yeah, these have been around much longer than we've really been calling them dogman or Bigfoot. But allegedly, the sightings of dogman type creatures dates all the way back to the ancient Greeks and Romans. They talked about what they called the cynocephali, or the beings, the creatures with the head of a dog. They said they encountered them both in northern Africa and in the Indus River Valley, and fought them. So there's lots of historical archive references about these types of creatures that date back not just decades, date back thousands of years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, even back to the Egyptian times, what there was the god of Anubis, and what was the other one?
Anubis and his brother Wepwawet. Anubis had the head of a jackal. Wepwawet had the head of a wolf.
Gotcha. I knew there was two of them. I just couldn't think of the other name. What was going through your head when you seen that dogman, DA?
I was just absolutely stunned. I went to LBL to research books. It was specifically for the book Apex Predator Dark Moon. I was researching that. But I met Nick Valente there, and we ended up exploring most of northern LBL for almost a week. I was there a couple days longer than Nick, but I got there before he did. But he was with me when we saw the one, and it looked like an upright dog. It didn't look like a massive werewolf like on Van Helsing. It looked like a dog standing on its hind legs, but it definitely had hands. It was leaning against a tree, and it was completely black. It had a head like a wolf, but the muzzle was shorter and blunter, like a Rottweiler or like a Mastiff. Very powerful looking jaws, but it wasn't like long and pointed like a wolf. And once it realized we'd seen it, it turned and took off. And it was stupid fast. I mean, really fast. Of course, being the geniuses that we are, we jumped out of the car and chased it. Neither of us were armed. and we chased it into the woods, but it was already so far ahead of us. There was no catching it. We could hear it smashing through the bushes, and it was getting fainter and fainter the longer we listened. So it was really moving through the woods. So I went back over to the tree that it had been standing under, and when you lean against something, like if you put your hand against a wall or a tree to lean on it, you didn't generally put your hand about shoulder level. That's just a comfortable spot. You just like lean against it, or even lean your shoulder against it. It's just more comfortable if it's right about that height. I'd seen that its hand was right next to a branch, so I put my hand up to that branch and I could reach it, but it was like uncomfortably high, like above my head. And I'm 5'10", and I estimated it was between 6.5 and 7 feet tall, because it was taller than me, just not massively so. But I will say one thing: it was stupid fast.
Yeah, the reports I've heard, they seem like they're like lightning fast. Yeah. Could you tell with the muscle build on it or anything?
Like I said, it seemed like, if you have a dog jump up and put its paws on your shoulders, how, a dog's chest is narrower than a person's and it doesn't have shoulders like ours. That's what it looked like. It looked like a dog on its hind legs. It didn't really look like super muscular. It just looked like a dog would standing up, but it had hands.
I've heard reports of some of the dogmen. They say their legs look almost like a human's, and then some of them have the backwards facing legs like a dog. How their legs are kind of shaped different than humans. Could you tell how his legs were shaped?
This one had legs shaped like a dog, and it had a dark tail. It was completely black, but it didn't run like you would expect like a person to run. When it like we would just like this, but when it took off, it kind of bounded, and then went down the ravine, and it covered 30 yards in three strides.
Yeah, so if you'd have been out there if you'd have been out of the vehicle, it could have got to you real quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it could have gotten to us. I don't think it wanted to. I think it was just surprised that we saw it, because I didn't see it until it moved. It was standing completely still underneath the shadow of a tree. And as we were in the vehicle, we were only doing 3 or 4 miles an hour. What we were doing was we were driving down the road looking for abandoned campsites, like old primitive campsites back in the woods, to get out and look for tracks. Well, we hadn't seen any of those yet, but we were driving very slow. He was looking out the left side, I was looking out the right. And I looked right at the thing, and it didn't really dawn on me what I was looking at until it turned its head to watch us go by. And as soon as it moved, just like deer hunting, 9 times out of 10, you didn't see a deer till it moved. And once it moved, I keyed in on that movement, and that's when I was like smacking Nick in the shoulder and pointing. So I got a good look at it, probably 15 to 20 seconds, and Nick probably saw it for a good solid 10 seconds before it was like, oh, it see me, and then it took off.
Yeah, so you got a real good look at it. 20 seconds is a long time if you're staring at something, because if you take the time it takes to count to 20 seconds, that's a good bit of time for you to be looking at something. So that's awesome. Oh, well, I only have one more thing I want to talk about if you have the time, bud.
Sure.
Now you and Robbie have been to Blunk Road several times, and you even wrote a book about the Beast of Blunk Road. Here this past January, you and Robbie and Doc and Noah, you guys took another trip down there to Blunk Road, didn't you?
And when I say Blunk Road in the middle of nowhere, I cannot emphasize enough. It is in the middle of nowhere. It is out, and there's nothing around. There are a few houses farther back up the road, but when you're at the end of Blunk Road, there's nothing but woods, and the river. That's it. And so we went down there, and I'd told Doc about the place, and Noah and I had been down there before, and I'd taken Robbie down there before. But we pulled down to Blunk Road and pulled down to the water, and it was pretty cold. And in January, you don't want to get in the water. The river was up because it's been a pretty wet year. When the river was up, it was moving kind of quick, and that water was real cold. James River gets a lot of water to it from springs, so I'm going to bet that water was probably 40 degrees, so not someplace you would want to get. So we pulled down in there and got out and we're looking around, and we're just kind of checking the place out. And then when we got back in the vehicle, Doc turned around and shined the flashlight out across the lake. I know the river. I mean, not the lake. He shines the headlights on bright out across the river. And lo and behold, what do we see in the water? And the water was probably 7-8 feet deep and moving fast and very cold. We see the head and shoulders of a creature that we believe was a Bigfoot, because it had the wide shoulders and the conical head, coming against the current, coming right at us. And we can see the eye shine, everything as it's coming at us. And that river's pretty wide. So at that point, we took off. Because, like I said, we didn't want to be around if it comes up out of the water unfriendly. Right. But we get up the road a few miles, and Doc's like, what if that was just a log in the road? I'm like, dude, it had eye shine. There wasn't no log in the road. He goes, well, let's go back and be sure. So we end up turning around, driving back down there, put the headlights out on that exact same spot, and it's still there. And now it's closer to our side of the river. So I don't know if we interrupted it fishing or if it decided that, we were on the menu. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. Well, if it was after us or fish. But at this point, it was much closer to our side of the river and was wading against current. So at that point, we decided, okay, it's time to unask the AO and just not come back, because it was clearly coming at us. Right. Robbie had gotten out of the vehicle, so we had to grab him, tell him to get his ass back in the truck, and we hauled ass out of there. Well, the next day, I had a buddy of mine go down there that lives in the area, and had him just to ease our mind to make sure it wasn't like a tree or a rock sticking up out of the water, despite the fact that we'd seen it move. We'd seen the eye shine, and it was closer to us the second time. We wanted to be absolutely certain that we weren't just, all paranoid and making things up. And my buddy sends me a picture and goes, yeah, with that area you're describing, there's nothing in the water. And, he had sent me some pictures of it, and it was just that exact spot that I described to him, right next to where the small area where you could put a boat in. Just to the right of that, that was completely clear. No logs, no rocks, nothing.
Yeah. So I think you and Robbie and Doc and Noah, I think you guys might be cryptid magnets.
We might be. Or at least we're dumb enough to go poke the bear when nobody else does.
Hey, we like poking bears around here.
Hell yeah. So the next big one I'm wanting you involved on that area I mentioned where they just here this month, right before the 4th of July, inexplicably closed a campground. I want to go down to that area. It's down on the other side of Branson, over in some pretty thick woods, off of the end of Lake Taneycomo near the White River, and I want to get back in there because that story seems to be the story that came out of that area is not only aggressive but something new. And I don't want to go into a whole lot of details until we've had a chance to go down there. But if it pans out, it may be a series of expeditions in and out of that area.
As old Doc says, I'm down like 4 flat tires.
And including at one point, I'd like to, if we can get in with a pontoon boat, I'd like to put into that one hollow that I pointed out on the map. I'd like to put into that hollow and spend a couple of nights down there.
Yeah, I'll be able to look out for one back.
That's going to have to be a well-armed expedition. Because if the reports are true, yeah, it's going to get ugly. And the whole point is to get in there and get footage.
Yep, and be able to show that footage. I guess.
And survive to. So it's not found footage. We're not going to go Blair Witch. We want to actually be able to show it off.
I guess found footage is still footage. It's just not the footage we want.
That's true. Well, my phone automatically uploads to the cloud, so somebody will get the footage.
Right. Well, DA, I want to thank you for coming on.
Anytime,
man, you got some awesome encounter stories. I really enjoyed listening to them. Why don't you go ahead and...
Hell, you were there for part of them.
Yeah, a few, and I plan to be there for a lot more now.
Hell yeah.
why don't you go ahead and plug your books again and your channel and talk about anything you want to talk about?
Cool. The podcast is now called the Nightmare Hunters Podcast, and we're live Wednesday and Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Central. You can join us anytime. We talk cryptids and anything weird and all strange things that go bump in the night. We'd love to have you as part of the Nightmare Nation. So come and see us over at youtube.com/Nightmare Hunter Podcast. Or you can just search D.A. Roberts or D.A.X. Machina, which is the old name of the channel. But if you find me on Facebook, you'll find links to all of that. You can also find all of my books on Amazon as well as at daroberts.net. I have 36 books currently in print. They're now all available in print, Kindle, and on Audible. So I hope you guys will check all those out. I would love to have you guys reading the stories. And if you'd like to send us an encounter story of your own, you can reach out to us at daroberts@daroberts.net. I would love to hear your stories.
Heck yeah! Now, what's your latest book called? The
one that just came out night before last is Lakeview Man, Dead of Winter. It's the 4th book of the Lakeview Man series, and it's all set right there on Table Rock Lake. In fact, part of this one is set in Combs Ferry.
Yes, but as soon as I heard that, I was like, I love the Lakeview series anyway, but I was like, even more now. Well, DA, thank you for coming on, bud.
Anytime.
I'm gonna go ahead.
Anytime.
All right, guys. We here at Boone County Cryptids, if you have any encounter story that you'd like to get off your chest at all, it doesn't matter big or small. Every encounter is important to us. If you want to send in an encounter story, send it to boonecountycryptids@gmail.com. And we'd love to have a like, share, and subscribe if we earn it from you guys. And want to thank you for being here tonight. And again, DA, thank you so much. And
Anytime,
I'm gonna plug Robbie's books too.
Definitely.
Robbie Jed Rains. He's got 2 books out currently in publish, and he's got another one coming up before long. What are the name of his books, DA?
It's the first book is Silver Star, the Silver Star series.
Yeah.
You would ask me that. I'm drawing a complete blank. Hell, I barely remember the names of my books. But they're about werewolves and cryptids and all things that go bump in the night. The first one, I cannot remember the first one's title off the top of my head. The second one is Lizard Man Escape or Swamp, and the new one is going to be called The Wampus Cat. But I can't think of the name of the first one.
I've read them, but yeah, sorry, Robbie. That's why I was asking you, DA. I've read them both, but I couldn't remember the exact titles. So, but anyway, go buy Robbie's books too. He's got some good ones up there, and he's really progressing as he writes books. They get better and better. So, but again, DA, thank you, and I guess we will. If you don't care to hang out backstage for just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream.
Sounds good.